going. What's your drink of choice?
Today I am drinking La Croix because it tastes like soda, but it's not soda, so it almost feels like you're cheating.
It is very much cheating on soda, but that's okay.
You're either going to come out of this jacked AF or like an extra 30 pounds, right? So I want to not be the guy that has the extra 30 pounds coming out of quarantine.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to stick to no soda, no pop, no salty snacks, that kind of stuff.
I think a large majority of the people will probably be on that end of maybe gaining some pounds.
Yeah.
So that's good to have some restraint there. And we've got some people trickling in already. So I think without further ado, Liam Martin, thanks so much for joining me. A guy who, at least in the remote circles, needs no introduction. For anybody in the remote communities, for anybody who does not know.
A little bit in the digital nomad space. I think if you got more digital nomads, I'm probably not super well known, but yeah, remote work.
Okay, cool. So for folks who don't know Liam, CEO, co-founder of Time Doctor, of Staff.com, the Running Remote Conference, and you're hosting Remote Aid 2020, which I have such a over one of my shoulders here, an advertisement for low budget advertisement over my shoulder for Remote Aid 2020, which is a virtual summit to help companies get through remote work challenges. You're going to have a lot of really awesome, renowned speakers to deliver some great content and on how to scale remote companies, things that you can do as a company who's been forced to function remote at this time. That's going to be next week on the 20th. 8 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time to 7:30 p.m. So I want to start there because I think that that's the most important. I mean, that's the thing that we really want to talk about and get people engaged in is understanding how they can get help at this time. From my understanding, you guys already have over 2,000 attendees.
Yes.
Why would someone who is kind of living like day to day right now, trying to keep their company afloat, why should they spend a day attending an online event like this?
Oh, well, that's a pretty simple one. Working remotely is not like working on premise. And again, if you need explanations for this kind of stuff, just let us know in the comments or comment. So on-prem companies are basically companies inside of an office. That's the way that majority of remote work was done in 2018. That was 96% of all companies in the United States. Now, by our best guess, and we're doing a lot of data analysis on this, 70% of the US workforce is now remote. So it's been a monumental shift. And the things that we're getting, particularly like on the Time Doctor side, as an example, which is our SaaS product, time tracking for remote teams, we've seen governments signing up. We've seen massive institutions signing up and saying to themselves, how the heck do we do this? I had a client that had, they had their Zoom calls on all day, every day. So you basically, to log into work, you had to log into this Zoom call in which there were just like 62 other conversations happening all at the same time. This doesn't work. This is not the way that you do remote work. We have a playbook. We know what it is. We've done it at places like Running Remote as an example before, and we can definitely teach this stuff. We thought to ourselves, when we canceled Running Remote in for April 20th. It was supposed to be in Austin, Texas, and we lost a whole bunch of money. We said to ourselves, well, how can we best help at this point? And it's really education connected to remote work. Can't cure coronavirus, but hopefully we can get people to work a little bit better, reduce anxiety a little bit. And that's really the difference between your business succeeding over the next 6 months and failing.
And that's interesting you say that, especially a company who's got Zoom going 24/7, like around the clock. That's kind of an interesting way to approach remote work. And I think there's different levels of this, right? And I saw some really awesome article about most people are in like level 2 or phase 2 of remote work out of maybe 5 phases, I think there was. And that might've been from your newsletter actually, which I've found very valuable.
Right.
And for anybody listening, I had gone to Running Remote last year. I will have to drop in the comments the video that I filmed there, but it was an awesome conference, really good time. And I think, Liam, based on what you've seen, what are the biggest mistakes that a lot of these companies are making? Like they're being forced to
remote right now.
Be remote. Yeah. So like they didn't really have a choice of that, and now they're probably making some sort of mistakes. Well, what are you seeing in the industry that they're making as far as mistakes that you can correct really quickly?
Sure. So number one is usually I talk about how it should be people, process, and tools in that order. But this is the one instance in which I think you would reverse that arc, because you've got the people already. You just need to be able to give them the processes and then deploy the tools to be able to make this entire process work. So first thing that I see is people need to kind of get shocked by reality. And if you're watching this right now, you need to assess your P&L. You need to figure out where you need to cut. And that's an unfortunate reality. I would say you need to have to kind of take a look at three different situations. What's remote? What's the situation for the next 6 months? What's the situation for the next year? And then what's the situation for the next 2 years? So maybe come up with like a, liberal and conservative plan with regards to your P&L and do those cuts immediately. So say to yourself, how can I survive over the next 6 months so I have the capital to be able to pivot into something else? I was just talking to the CEO of Monday.com, which is a massive project management system, and they weren't really connected to the remote work world at all. Well, if you go to Monday.com and then you go to Facebook or YouTube or anywhere else, you're going to be blanketed by a complete pivot, which is this is the project management system for remote teams. So that's what you need to really assess and figure out, how am I going to move into this new industry, which in essence now has become the dominant way of working. Then after that week is over, you need to get into your process documentation. And this is this thing that I tell every single remote company that is not really understanding, or the suddenly remote companies that are not really understanding this. It's like a stitch in time saves 9. I was talking to a client that had about 100 people, and one of the people in the team, unfortunately, did come down with a very serious case of coronavirus, had to be admitted to the hospital, and it was the only person that knew how to do payroll. It's the only person that knew how to cut the checks. Because those SOPs were not built, digitized, put up on a system like GitLab or Trainual or any of these other tools that are out there, they couldn't cut their checks for any of their employees. I mean, that's a disaster. So you need to audit, and you need to say to yourself, where is there sacred knowledge inside of the organization that I can basically digitize? So what is one person know that's absolutely critical to the business, and if they get sick, then the business can't function? Generally, for the founder, most of that is in their head, so they need to get that out. And then secondarily, run an audit and assume 20% of your team may be sick at any one point. And then run through that simulation and say to yourself, how can the business continue to function if that's going to occur? I know those are worst case scenarios, but you need to do those assessments today, this week, so you have that up and running and that you're functional.
How do you get that number, the 20%?
That was just an estimate that we kind of came up with, just a worst case on our side. We've seen clients in like New York, as an example, that are higher than that, that have had some serious problems. Also, people that are in developing countries. I think this is something that's not getting enough press, is we're so focused on G7 countries. We're so focused on Europe and the United States, when in reality, this is going to kill millions in Bangladesh. This is going to kill millions in Africa. This is going to kill a lot of the developing world, which is also why I think that digital nomadism is one of those things that I talked about this a couple weeks ago, which was, or I guess a month or two now, saying, hey, we need to stop doing this because digital nomads are like the perfect spreaders for this type of situation. So I said, everyone, we just need to chill out, relax. We'll be able to get back to this. I know we're going to jump back into the economy. It's going to hopefully be months, could quite possibly be years before we're back up and running. But the faster that we lock down, the faster that we don't have a 20% worst case scenario, maybe we have a 5% worst case scenario, and we're able to get back to work in our regular lives faster.
Well, and how do you see this playing out as far as the impact on digital nomadism?
Canceled for right now, unfortunately. Like digital nomadism isn't happening over the next year. So, and I can kind of boil that down in a more specific way. remote, and I consider myself a digital nomad. I travel 6 months out of the year. I don't want to. I had a video which was digital nomadism is canceled, and it got a lot of views, but it also got a lot of hate. And I just want to explain kind of where I'm coming from. We need to be able to, there's going to be a lot of really big machines that need to get back up and running before digital nomadism can succeed. And I think in 2 to 3 years, it will be 10x what it currently is today.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have so many more people that are going to be working remotely, and a lot of those people want to become location independent. However, for right now, you need co-working spaces to function. You need the ability for people to actually work remotely effectively. You need them to have the free cash in order to travel. And the most important one is the airline industry needs to be back up and running. And it's not just going to turn on, right? So it's going to be a very slow process, and a lot of those tickets are going to be a lot more expensive. If you look at the prices post 9/11, I think that's the curve that we're probably going to work on, but it's probably going to be a little bit longer. So 9/11 took about 3 to 4 months between getting up and running with the airline industry and the airline industry having costs that were the same as before that happened.
Gotcha.
I think it's probably going to be about 6 to 8 months before we get back to normal once we have a vaccine.
Interesting. And that vaccine's going to take some time too. I think it's very
1 to 2 years. I think
like it's not even so it seems like we're in this for a while for sure. So and one of the interesting things you had told me before this conversation was, and you talked about co-working spaces and that being a necessity for people down the line. Tell me a little bit more about your strategy for co-working spaces and what this means for future of co-working spaces and places where digital nomads would normally be congregating. But, for me, for instance, I'm here in Playa del Carmen, Mexico. This is where I have moved. I'm an expatriate life here, and I can't go to my co-working space. So what happens to a lot of these?
So a lot of them are going to go to business. They need to cash flow over the next 2 years. I think if I was going to buy a co-working space right now, I would do a very clear assessment of, can I cash flow this business over the next 2 years? Because after that dust settles, those places are going to explode. So working from home is not remote working, right?
Yeah.
Working from home is not digital nomadism. And we know this already. Remote work is, I can go to a co-working space. I can go to a coffee shop. I can be location independent. I can work in Chiang Mai, or I can work from Ubud, or any of these types of beautiful places. And that's the reality that we're going to have in the next 2 to 3 years. And that's going to be 10 to 20 to 30x larger than what it is right now. We just need to cash flow those businesses to the next part of, to get past this difficult part in history. And I think that's the difference between the ones that are going to succeed and the ones that are not going to succeed. I think the mom and pop shops we're probably actually going to see the amalgamation of the co-working industry, which is actually WeWork is supposed to be that organization. But because of the net margin on a co-working industry, the co-working industry in general, it's very difficult to be able to amalgamate those types of industries. So there might be a Starbucks of, co-working that pops up in the next 2 to 3 years that just buys up all these companies for, unfortunately, a dime on the dollar, and then says to themselves, okay, well, we're going to turn them all into running remote co-working spaces, as an example. I wouldn't do that.
I think that's a good point, though, because a lot of the biggest companies in the world right now, the Ubers, the IBMs, the Apples, they were born in times of recession. And they were born because the people that were starting them looked at the resources available to them, and they were resourceful, and they saw those opportunities rather than what a lot of people are seeing, which is this huge recession and depression and all those things. So I think it's interesting that you found that potential opportunity within your already vast network of opportunities that you hold.
I think one of the best things you can think about in an economic correction, which we're definitely in, is accelerate through the curve. So if you're car racing, the only way that you can overtake someone is through curves. It's the only way that you can do it. and you have to accelerate through those curves, and that's risky. But if you make it through, then you end up winning the race. And we're in that type of moment right now. So if you've collected, if you've got some free cash is king right now, go after those businesses, try to figure out what you can do. And, this is when the deck is being reshuffled live, which is very, very exciting. Exciting could be disastrous, or exciting could be very good. It depends on which side of the table you're on. But there's a lot of action that's happening right now, so you need to be mindful of that and keep your head on a swivel.
Yeah. And speaking of kind of reshuffling the cards and your head on a swivel, you guys had a live event, as we mentioned, that was in person in Austin, scheduled. You had to cancel. Tell me about your thought process. Like what happened when you had to cancel that and now reschedule that?
That was a kick in the teeth. So we lost. I think we have to figure out the end losses, but we lost a couple $100,000 on that event. And for anyone that bought a ticket, we said, we can refund you, no problem. Here's the email to do that. If you're a sponsor, you want a refund, here's where you can do that. And we actually had a really great response. I think 6% of attendees refunded their ticket, which was great. We were really happy about that. They're all getting moved forward to the next event and we can run it. But fundamentally, we just kind of said to ourselves, we've already lost so much money. Let's just turn lemons into lemonade and see whether or not we could, again, teach people on how to work remotely. So we set up remote aid. Everything goes to charity. If you want to get in for free, you can. If you want to give a couple bucks towards the Red Cross, you can do that as well. But this is not going to be like one of our normal events. This is going to be very much a remote 101 as opposed to like a remote 398 that I know you saw in person when we were in Bali and doing last year's event. So it's going to be a little bit more basic, but if you're suddenly remote, this is definitely the event for you. And there's going to absolutely be more advanced stuff for other people. It's just we're focusing on trying to see how we can help people, how we can get them to get remote this week, this month, and hopefully still be functional in 6 months.
Gotcha. Okay. So they can expect this day long of education, and what comes after that?
Well, that comes the communities after that. So we're really focusing on making sure that we're doing a lot of information exchange. Even at the event, it's not just a Zoom call. It's a very multifaceted piece of technology that we're using. It's called Hop-In. So we're going to be able to do roundtable discussions and everyone's going to be interacting, like expect to talk during this event and discuss. And we're also asking everyone that even went to running remote in previous years to hopefully come and help teach people, because the reality is that if you've been to the running remote conference, you're probably actually already an expert at remote work. So we're trying to get as many of those people into that group, because it is a situation in which we were just, we're like internet nerds that just want to work remotely. And we've been doing that the last couple of years, but now we are fortunately or unfortunately, the world experts, which is scary because when you think about having a couple billion people that are now remote and they're looking for answers, we are unfortunately or fortunately the group that has to provide those types of answers to people. So that's what we're focusing on, is just education, getting the information out as much as possible.
But you in particular seem like you're someone who's in a good place to do that out of a lot of people that would be. I mean, you've been remote for 15 years, right? Yeah. So tell me, if you could go back and you had the knowledge that you have now, what would you tell yourself 15 years ago if you were, at that place now in today's time?
Ooh, well, I mean, in today's time, I would say, number one, everything's going to be okay. In 2 years, this shall pass like everything else, and we're going to do just fine. And then after that was over, I would probably really talk to people about the long-term implications of where you think you're going to go. We just did some polling with customers that have just gone remote, in the last month, and we asked them, how many of you are planning to go back to the office? And 22% said no, they're not going to go back, which is very interesting because I think in 6 months that number is going to be considerably higher. So month one, 22% have said that's it. So can I get rid of my office lease? Is this a $300,000 a month cost that I don't necessarily need at this point? Probably not. I can actually guarantee you that this is not what you need. How can I assess where I'm going to go next?
Yeah.
The biggest thing that I can tell people is it's not as scary as you think it is. Our industry is almost entirely connected to this remote work thing. I don't know about that. I don't think they're going to be as productive as when they're inside of an office. We are going to be very clearly proving that that is not true at scale within the next couple weeks to months. So that's what I would really focus people on, is just saying, measure the productivity of your team, figure out where you're going to be in 3 months, and then make some very clear decisions, because we're still going to be stuck in this mess, and go full remote.
I've talked to quite a few companies who don't really know how to measure that. So what would you say to them as far as like, how do you start even measuring some of these things?
So really depends. There's project management systems that you can obviously deploy to be able to do that. We do weekly syncs and we do one-on-ones, and we have clear KPIs for everyone inside of the company. We use Time Doctor, obviously, which is our time tracking tool for remote workers. And all of those tools together, at the end of the day, are going to show you, what am I currently doing now? Where am I at? Am I doing a good job, a great job, or a not so good job? And that's generally actually, I have green, yellow, and red for every single employee, and I have a KPI for that quarter. If they're not hitting that, then I sit down with them and try to figure out how they can fix it. If they're red for 3 months, we need to either move them or we need to get them out of the company. That's the harsh reality of where it is. And it's funny because I've never worked inside of an office before. I've always worked remotely. And I thought that this is how all businesses worked. But in reality, it's not the way that businesses work. A lot of the time, it's like, Jordan from marketing has decided to call us all into a meeting to discuss his new project that he's working on, and I play on my phone for an hour and a half. That doesn't really happen inside of well-run remote teams. So that's something that I think is going to be a learning as well, that we're going to talk about during Remote Aid, is like how to get those metrics, how to deploy them, and then how to measure them.
Cool. So I looked a little bit more into your background as well. So I want to pepper you with some personal questions, because I think this will just be funny. Okay. So you were an Olympically good figure skater. Is that fair to say?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, sure. Okay. That was good. I broke my kneecap.
So you broke your kneecap.
I was out at like 20, which was super frustrating. But that was definitely that was the thing I was supposed to do with my life.
And then that
Worlds and Olympics.
And that got channeled into remote work, it sounds like. So tell me, what was that? I'm assuming that was really difficult for you to go through, but what did you learn from that experience that you think might parallel lessons in remote work or parallel other life lessons that you've had?
I don't hire anybody unless they've done competitive sports, been in the military, or have done some type of very menial job, like they've worked at a McDonald's. So if they haven't done 3 of those things throughout their career, if that's not on their CV, I don't hire them. And what that shows you is, can I eat SHIT for an extended amount of time and come out the other end and be okay? It's discipline, right? It's just when you're training. I was training 8 hours a day at 17, living on my own since I was 14. And that creates a good feedback loop where I will work for myself. A lot of people don't work for themselves because they have to make the decision to get out of bed in the morning. And a lot of people, unfortunately, just don't do that. So that's what I look for, that form of discipline. And as I said, you find it in menial jobs, competitive sports, or the military. I haven't found it anywhere else.
Wow. So if you're wanting to work for Time Doctor, Staff.com, or running
You got to
remote,
show me that you worked at Starbucks or
you had to have
McDonald's.
been a busboy or
That's it, right? It's just like you had to have a job for money, just because you're basically you need some money. That's kind of like that's one of the best ways to develop character, in my opinion.
That's really funny you say that, because I have purposely kept some jobs on my LinkedIn, for instance, because I think they do exactly that. They show that I've come from a place of character. I used to work at a Chinese barbecue as a busboy, and I'm proud of being a dishwasher there and cleaning out the shit that I had to clean out, and playing competitive baseball for 13 years. And some of those things that I think are really, like you said, important to building character and making sure this person can eat shit and be a problem solver. I think that's great.
Very clearly, there are moments inside of businesses in which people say, hey, guess what? We've got to shovel shit for the next 3 weeks. Who is going to do this with me? And the people that have had that experience can do it. And the people that don't, unfortunately, just they're not the type of people that we want to work with.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And other parts of your background that I thought were interesting was not finishing high school, but then getting a master's in sociology, which seems like a very backwards way of doing things. So maybe you can speak to like what that experience was like, going from an education where you drop out and then somehow getting into sociology, and what was that like?
That was it's the same exact lesson, which was discipline. So I dropped out of high school to pursue a career in skating. And then when I broke my kneecap and I lost all of my funding for skating, then I got in on a prayer to university. But the difference is I had already done all the crazy stuff that I really needed to do, living on my own since 14 and being one of the only heterosexual men in a sport that's dominated by not heterosexual men, and being around a whole bunch of women all day long. I had gotten that all out of my system. And what I ended up doing when I got into university is I had a huge chip on my shoulder because I thought that everyone else was smarter than me in the room. And I studied 6 hours a day, every day. I mean, I was lecturing, and then I was in the library for 6 hours a day. And that's what got me through undergrad and then got me into grad school. And it wasn't me being any smarter than anyone else. It was just me willing to put in the time, put in the work.
And that seems to be a theme within your life. And I think with anybody who's successful it goes back to eat shit, right? Or put so much more work in than other people are willing to do. I'm curious, when you have Staff.com, Time Doctor, running remote, how does Liam's priorities get allocated? Your time?
Yeah, so running remote is the dessert business. So that's what I do on Fridays. So I commit Fridays to working on running remote, and Igor basically runs running remote. So he's the guy that's in charge of operations, and he has his team. And I'm more there just sort of as the, I guess, the soul of it, the energy to push forward to see what are we going to do next. And then most of my time is really spent on Time Doctor. A little bit of my time is spent on Staff.com, but Time Doctor recently has just has accelerated considerably because we went from a nice to have to a need to have very, very quickly. So I've been focused entirely just on making sure that the servers are running and everyone's got proper service.
What is that like for you, identity-wise, to have your hands in so many places?
Great. It is amazing. Never put all your eggs in one basket, ever, because running remote loses a couple $100,000 because coronavirus killed it.
Yeah.
Right. If I had all my eggs in that basket, I'd be a pretty unhappy guy. Right. But Time Doctor's doing well. It's functional. Everyone still has a job, and we're doing okay. So I don't feel as bad about it. You need to kind of have that flow in order to really be a happy person. I found people that have just entirely connected their identity to one singular thing, whether that's, a partner, a business, their physical state, anything like that, it's never a good thing.
It's so interesting because I feel like I hear both sides of that coin, depending on who you talk to. Some people will say hedge your bets and, have multiple streams of income and do different things. But then some people are like, you have to double down. You have to have no plan B. There's like, kind of this school of thought that goes both ways, which is interesting.
Well, so, I definitely doubled down on remote. So in 2018, it was 4% of the US workforce, and it was projected to be 50% by 2028. And there's another study that projected it to be by 2027.
Yeah.
So my thesis is remote work will become the dominant way of work. And I think probably you would agree with that same thesis as well. We just jumped forward 10 years in a month. That's all that happened. Yeah. So that's a net win, obviously, for the people that were already prepared for this, but it could have gone the other direction as well, right? So I'm all in on remote work, but then inside of that, I need to be able to stay happy. So as an example, I like going to the gym every 2 days, and all I do is squat. That's it. I do squats. I can't do squats right now. I don't have the right equipment, right? And that's one of those things. It's not just businesses. It's like everything. You need to keep a really multifaceted perspective towards your life, because bad things are going to happen to you. I'm sure people are listening right now, and bad things are happening to them right now. And those things are probably some of the worst things that have ever happened in their entire lives, unfortunately. So by having something else to kind of think of like, well, this is going bad, but you know what? I've got great kids, or, hey, my partner is fantastic. Those are the things that keep you level in these types of situations. Because I think the biggest thing that we need to kind of look at over the next 6 months is mental health for everyone, because that's going to be, I think we're sitting on basically a sociological nightmare within the next couple of months, because people stuck in their houses for 6 months. Look at my hair. I'm just about ready to crack. So, it's, and I'm not doing bad, right? So there's a lot of other people right now that are probably doing a lot worse off than me. And I think it's our responsibility as a community to be able to reach out to those people as much as possible.
I've been so fortunate here in Mexico that they have, I had a roommate, and I'd had my girlfriend. So we were spending, a significant amount of time, us three. So it wasn't like I was feeling so alone. And my roommate actually left. He went back to Canada. He's a fellow Canadian, went back this past month, or this past weekend, after spending 3 months here and us living together. And all of a sudden I felt my world shift a little bit. I was like, whoa, like I feel a little bit less complete now, because he's, not here. We're not co-working. It's that sort of thing. Obviously I'm so fortunate to still have my girlfriend here, but I can't imagine what it would be like if I was just completely alone. Right. And that's something I didn't really even think of. And the whole mental health thing is going to be so important. And I think it also plays a part in the company culture, right? Like of a remote company, is because people are now spending a lot of time isolating. So how do you, as you're building this company culture, or as your remote company is figuring out how individuals are holding up, like how do you support a culture that helps people through that?
So just from an emergency perspective, we've got some life coaches and psychologists that we've hired online. Like, I think it was BetterHelp, but I can't remember exactly. We hired one of these services, and they're overbooked with therapy calls with some of the employees inside of the company. I've had an employee that's had quite literally a nervous breakdown live in a call with me, because he lives in Manhattan and there was a body bag in his lobby. Right. And just saying, well, I can't leave my house. How am I going to get something to eat? Right. Yeah. How can I go out and get groceries? So figuring out very pragmatic solutions to those problems is, I think, what a lot of business owners need to figure out now. So we Instacarted him his groceries, and they even had a little protocol where you could have like some alcoholic wipes that come in the groceries, so that you can literally wipe down all of your groceries afterwards. These little things that maybe took him from a 9 to a 7 on the anxiety scale. That's what I think you need to figure out, real pragmatic solutions right now in order to solve that issue. The second thing is, this is when the real business leaders, get divided from like the fair weather entrepreneurs that I see in the world today. So are you willing to not pay yourself a salary for the next year to be able to make sure that everyone still has a job? Like, what cuts are you willing to do to yourself to be able to make sure that you're okay, or sorry, that your company's okay? That's, I think, a really important piece that not many are taking into consideration. It's not just about survival. It's about making sure that everyone inside your company can survive. And what you do over the next couple months will dictate the employee loyalty that you will have over the next 5 years. I am absolutely certain that this is an opportunity for people to step up and say, here's the right thing that we should be doing at this time to make sure that everyone's really happy working inside of the company. And when you look at, I look at retention metrics inside of the company, right? So how many people quit per year? And you should probably know those numbers if you don't, inside of your organization. And that's what you want to measure over the next year or two, right? Who gives a shit about me? Does my boss give a shit about me or not? Right? I was talking to actually one of my bankers this morning, and she said, oh, well, I'm in the office. And I said, why are they putting you in the office? And I know where she works. There's like 2,000 people in that office building. And she said, oh, well, we have to work there. And, that's an example. She's not happy. And that's an example of what you can do right now as a leader and say, okay, well, we're going to figure out a solution to these types of problems. It's going to create such massive waves through your culture, because we're, in peacetime, you can't really show what decisions you're going to make. But in wartime, which is where we're at right now, those things are absolutely critical to really show the company culture, what you stand for and what you've decided not to stand for.
Right. And I think this goes to something you were saying as well about this time really showing us the distinction that this is not just for like tech bros and tech companies, and like this is really a shift of mind for the entire world. So
the office is dead. This is like office is dead. It's not coming back. If you are in an office lease, if you lease offices as a profession, you are out of business. We have performed the largest work experiment in the history of mankind right now. It is going to completely change the way that we work. And we already know this. We've been doing it, right? Like this is, and once people do it, I think it was the Buffer report that said 96% of people on their first remote work experience said they wouldn't go back to an office experience, right? So work from home is not remote work, right? Work from home is I'm locked inside of my house because there's this scary virus outside that's going to kill me.
Yeah.
But even inside of that, I think we're going to see, let me just throw some numbers. I think we're probably going to see 70% of people want to stay with a remote work agreement when this is all said and done. Maybe it's going to be 50, maybe it's going to be 90, but like it's going to be in that spectrum. And that's going to mean that we're going to go from 4% in 2018 to 50, 60, 70, 80% of the US workforce working remotely. And globally, this is going to be a complete game changer for everything that we're doing. And this is why I'm telling everyone, if you want to pivot into an industry, get into remote work as quickly as humanly possible, because everyone knows that that's the future. It was the future before, we just accelerated it.
Yeah, it is crazy how that has, it's something both of us obviously had known before that, but now it's almost like you're like looking around and it's like, oh, everybody's starting to get it now. And I feel like I'm even sensing this, and I don't know if this is just partly my ego too, but I'm also seeing this from other people in the remote work space. And it's not like meaning to be condescending towards people who are just finding out about it, but it's almost like I told you so. Like, I don't know if you ever feel that, but it's just kind of like,
I mean, you try to plenty of time to do that afterwards.
Yeah, exactly.
To be honest with you.
Well, and,
right?
and I think there's the compassionate way. So this is where I was kind of going with that, is that I think what you guys are doing with the remote aid, for instance, is so important, because this is the compassionate view of like, hey, we know that this is an issue, a challenge, and all the tides are going to bring us, tide's going to bring us all up. And we all want remote work to be more than just being at home, being scared of a virus. So I think it's going to be a very interesting time.
Yeah. Do you know the Dubourg hoax?
What is it called?
The Dubourg hoax.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so February 1814, Napoleon is defeated, right? Mm-hmm. And there was a man that was dressed up as a colonel, Colonel Dubourg, and he goes back to the UK stock market and he says, hey, Napoleon won. And the stock market collapses. And then, I can't remember who bought up everything, but basically it was the Rothschilds, I believe, bought up everything in the stock market. And it was all a hoax. Basically, that person had set up, it was a fake colonel that had showed up that said, hey, the French have won and they're marching on England. That was the stock tip of the century, right? Mm-hmm. That was the stick tip of the century. Knowing remote work is going to be the dominant source of work is the next stock tip of the century. Yeah. If you are not all in on this right now, I mean, what more convincing do you need? This is going to be something that if you're not prepared to, and this is kind of like the silver lining of it, and people that know this are going to be able to succeed in the new economy. The people that don't know this, that are holding on, like the people, I was talking to somebody that was running, that runs office leases. And I kind of just said, the office is dead. He's like, oh yeah, sure. I mean, it's dead. Set the date. I'm telling you right now, we're going to have a conversation in 3 years and you're going to see how many office leases are still operating. There will be probably 25% of what their current levels were in December of 2019. Take that information, figure out what you need to do with it, figure out what type of businesses you need to do now. That's why I talked about at the very beginning. Reorient your P&L, get yourself back into a cash mindset, and then figure out how you're going to pivot and move into that new industry, because that is going to be the thing that is going to be a complete and utter shift of the way that we work. And I think that's where the majority of our work hours. No, sorry. Sleeping is more than the amount of time that we spend at work. And we just changed that entire mindset, right? Like the impact is going to be huge. Yeah.
And I think we had gotten a comment about some of the major shifts that we're going to see. I think we've touched on that. But we're up here on about 40 minutes. So Liam, I've been really appreciative to have you here live with me to discuss some of these things. It's been awesome. Remote aid on April 20th, something that everybody, any type of remote company or folks that are challenged with the reality of having to be remote right now, but not quite ready, or even for companies who've been remote, who want to get exposed to some people who are thought leaders in the industry. I know some of that content is going to be more one-on-one style, but I'd love to give you an opportunity for anything else that you want to say to this audience and things that you think are important to leave today with.
Boy, I mean, go to runningremote.com, check out Remote Aid. If you want to go, you can go for free. If you want to donate a couple bucks, we would really appreciate that. I think we're going to have some weird stuff dependent upon how much we raise during the event. So please stay. If you go and check that out, I think it's going to be pretty cool once we go live.
Is there going to be some with mermaids?
Actually, that was you asked that question, eh? And I'm just around so I'm in my home office right now, and quite literally, I have I almost dropped. I have mermaid tails everywhere in this office. So my partner of the last 6 years, she runs a chain of mermaid schools. She runs 15 mermaid schools throughout North America and the Middle East.
Wow.
And that's another example of a business that's 95% melted. But
right.
She runs this, this mermaid school, which is why everyone asks me that question that does the research. You're one of the top 10% that actually does the research, because people always ask me that question. But yeah, outside of mermaid and running remote, if you have any other questions, just hit me up. Probably the best spot is youtube.com/running remote. And all of our talks are up there for free. So if you just want to consume all the content, you can do it at youtube.com/running remote, even if you're not willing to come to the live event, or you don't have the cash right now to be able to donate. You can consume probably 50 or 60 hours of free content on there, and it's best in class remote work operators that are teaching you how to build and scale remote teams.
And I will say this, from the conference I went to in Bali that you guys hosted, I have sent out that asynchronous synchronous video. I've sent out the one with Ken Weary from Hotjar. Like, I've sent out so many of those talks to people who I've gotten into conversations with, and it's very, very valuable, awesome stuff. So if you do want to go over to YouTube, you'll find a lot of great resources there for running remote. Liam, thank you so much for being on today. I'm sure we've got a lot of folks that have visited this conversation and will follow you from here. So we appreciate you, man.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks. And we are